All right, the second part of our circles lesson requires a quick review of something called completing the square. Completing the square is finding a number that makes a trinomial into what's called a perfect square trinomial. In other words, a trinomial that factors down to a binomial squared. So the key to doing this is always going to be b divided by 2 squared. All right, now what that means in our three examples here are a, b, and c are the coefficients in our quadratic. B in this case is -8, so it's going to be -8 divided by 2 and then squared. Sorry, it's a little messy. That's going to get me -4, and when I square it is 16. So that is the magic number that I have to add in here. And what that allows me to do is that allows me to factor that trinomial into x minus 4, the quantity squared. So I turned it into a binomial squared. Next one, 14 is my b value. So I'm going to do 14 divided by 2 and square it. That is 7 squared is 49. So 49 is my magic number. I'm going to add in here, and let's see. Check it out. Will that factor? It sure will, into x plus 7, or x plus 7 squared. Great. Third one's a little different, but let's see what happens. I'm going to follow the same pattern here. It's 9 divided by 2, and I square it. When I do 9 divided by 2, I get 4.5. And when I square that, I get 20.25. And my factoring skills get a little confused when I get a decimal like that. So here's where we want to look at the pattern that we're noticing. So the pattern on each of these is this value that is in the binomial squared is b divided by 2. It's that value before I square it, right? -8 divided by 2 is -4. 14 divided by 2 is +7. So let's look what we do here. That was 4.5 that I got here. So that will factor into x plus 4.5, the quantity squared. All right. So that is a key skill for us to kind of level up to our next situation with circles. And that is this. This is what's called expanded form for circles. It's expanded form because all the terms are kind of spread out like that. I want to put it into this standard form, which will be really easy to graph from. And to do that, you might notice there's 2 binomials squared. So I have to complete the square 2 times here. First step I want to do is gather my like variables together. So x squared and -2x, I'm going to gather them. Okay, I'm going to make a perfect square trinomial out of that. Then I'm going to gather my y values. And again, I know I'm going to make a perfect square trinomial out of that, so I leave a little blank there. And then it's equal to I'm going to pull that 4 there. I'm going to add it to the other side. So it's going to be equal to 4. All right. Color coding is really helpful here to keep everything straight. So my first red setup deals with all the x's. So I want to do my b divided by 2 squared. So -2 divided by 2 and squared. -1 squared is +1. So that's what I'll be adding here. But we know the rules of math. You can't just throw a number in wherever you want to. If we have an equal sign, we have an equation. To keep it balanced, you have to do the same thing on both sides. So I'm going to add 1 on the right as well. Now my y's, I'm going to do the same thing. My 4 is the b value here. So I divide it by 2, and I square it, and that gets me 2 squared is 4. So I add 4, but again, I can't just add a 4 in wherever I want. I have to add it to the right as well. All right, now let's see, what does this all become? This is going to clean up real nice, real quick. This, what I have in red, my x perfect square trinomial will factor into x minus 1, the quantity squared. My y's, my blue writing there, will factor into y plus 2 the quantity squared. And then I combine all those numbers on the right-hand side, gets me 9. Look at that. That is the equation of our circle now in our standard good graphing form. And all I have to do is identify the center, which is going to be 1, -2. And the radius is going to be square root of 9, which is 3. There we go. Let's do another. Next one's going to be a little different, but following the same concept. So I'm going to color code again because I think it's really helpful. Now, I first want to gather my x terms together, but notice the difference here is there is a 2 in front of my x squared. That's okay. You have to factor that lead coefficient out. So I'm going to factor the 2 out. And what I'd be left with is x squared, and don't forget to factor the 2 out of my 8x as well. So it's going to be plus 4x. I'm going to leave a blank there because I know I'm going to have to complete that square. I'll come back to that, though, in a minute. Let's keep it going with the y terms. Again, there's a 2 in front of my y squared, so I must factor that out. And I must factor it out of my other y term as well, so minus 5y. Finally, at the end, I'm just adding my 18 over. It's going to be positive 18 on the right-hand side. All right, I'm looking good. I'm feeling pretty good with completing the square now, so I'm going to just kind of do that in my head real quick. 4 divided by 2 squared is plus 4. Be careful. We are not adding 4 to the right side to keep it balanced. Because if you think about where that 4 actually came from, that 4 I added inside the parentheses here. So I really added, if you think about distributing that in, I really added 8. I added 8 on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side. So I have to add it on the right-hand side because of that 2 being factored out. Same idea in the blue one here. So now I got -5 divided by 2 squared. So that's 2.5 squared is going to get me 6.25. That's my magic number again, right? But I'm not actually adding 6.25 on the left-hand side. If you think about distributing that back in, if you were to distribute back in, I'm not going to. If you distribute that in, that's really 2 times 6.25, which is 12.5. So you got to keep it balanced in every way, right? All right, now I'm ready to factor this down. So the 2 is going to stay on the outside of both of these. So it's 2 quantity x plus 2 squared plus 2 quantity y minus 2.5 squared equals, and then I'm just going to add up all these terms over here, which will get me 38.5. All right. Now, I'm not quite in my form that I want because notice this standard graphing form doesn't have coefficients in front of my binomials. There's no coefficient in front of the x squared or the y squared. So what I need to do is just divide everything by 2, those lead coefficients. So that's going to leave me with my final graphing form. And 38.5 divided by 2 is going to be 19.25. Finally, put it all together. So this is my awesome standard form, graphing form. But what it is asking for is the center will be at -2, 2.5, with a radius of square root of 19.25, which I'm just going to get as a decimal because a decimal inside of a radical is kind of nasty. So 4.387. Didn't quite fit it. There we go. Got my stats. All right. I now have a couple for you to practice. So wherever you are, I want you to pause. You're going to try them out. In 5 seconds, I'll show the answers. But again, I want you to pause and give it a shot yourself first. All right. Hopefully you gave it a shot. These are what you should end at. Sorry, it's a little blurry, but you get the idea. All right, stay tuned. Part 3 coming.